Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much to follow us. My name is Alessia Ragai, and I'm the Knowledge Management and Learning Coordinator of the project Bridge the Gap. For those who didn't attend last sessions, Bridge the Gap is a European-funded initiative coordinated by FIAP, the International Ibero-American Foundation for Administration and Public Policies, in partnership with three European agencies for development and cooperation, the Spanish, the Italian, and the Austrian, and two international NGOs, the European Disability Forum and the International Disability and Development Consortium. The initiative aims to contribute to the socio-economic inclusion, equality, and non-discrimination of persons with disabilities through more inclusive and accountable institutions and policies. In the framework of the knowledge management strategy developed within this project, we built this webinar-based training cycle to gradually explore the different issues taken into consideration by Bridge the Gap. The webinars are prepared and conducted by global and field experts selected by our staff. And the session are also prepared to be as much as possible interactive and also replicable and shareable. Each webinar is conducted in English, French, and Spanish in separate sessions. We already had 4 sessions. The first one was about the CRPD, an introduction of the convention and the second was about the Sustainable Development Goals. The third about disability inclusive development, and the last one was on inclusive and accessible project cycle management. For those who missed them, you can find the videos of the webinars together with the transcription of and the learning materials on our project website, on Facebook and Twitter, but also on our YouTube channel. You can find the links of these communication channels here in the chat box. Today, the 5th session of our training cycle will be on accessible communication. This is really an important session, I think, that we will try to make understand the importance of disability in communication and how to be aware of the communication barriers experienced by persons with disability. The session today will present also technical tips, best practices on communications accessible, on how to guide on creating, for example, accessible documents, presentation, etc. And because, of course, providing clear and concise information targeted to a particular audience is really important to ensure that all users have equal access to information. Also because, as we know very well, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability provides specific human rights protections for persons with disability, including accessibility of information and communication. The Convention also states that persons with disabilities have the right to enjoyment of the highest attainable access to information without discrimination on basis of disabilities. Specifically, the Article 9 of the Convention provides for equal access to information and communication technologies and the obligation to identify and eliminate barriers. Our speaker today is Paulien Bruijn. Paulien is working as disability inclusion specialist at Light for the World, based in the Netherlands. She has a wide experience with training African and Asian NGOs, policymakers, and disabled people organizations on inclusion of persons with disability in mainstream development and humanitarian action. She's also a senior disability and development advisor with 15 years experience, and she has experience in coordinating learning platforms, developing learning guides, and training on inclusive facilitation. Well, I give you the floor immediately to Pauline, and I thank you also her to dedicate her time today to us. But before leaving the floor to Pauline, I just would like to inform you that unfortunately, due technical issues, because the person in charge for the captioning today is not available, so unfortunately we don't have today the captioning as we used to provide just for this English session, and we will provide the description of this session later together with the recording of the webinar and all the other learning materials. Really, please accept my apologies for the inconvenience, and I really hope we will find a solution for the next sessions. So, well, Pauline, I give you the floor, and thank you again.
Okay, thank you very much, Alessia. Welcome everyone, also from my side. I'm talking from the Netherlands. Well, my name is Paulien Bruijn, and I do give a lot of trainings on disability inclusion and also in inclusive communication, but usually I have people in a training room and we're doing all kind of exercises. So I feel a bit uncomfortable going to talk to you for like about maybe half an hour, 45 minutes. So I'm not used to do that. Anyway, I hope it will be a nice, informative session together with all of you, and I'm happy to hear your questions and examples after the presentation. We'll have some time to answer the questions. All right, let's get started. The first slide. The PowerPoint is a bit slow, so please bear with me. We've tested it, and now, yeah, sorry, there it is. Good. So what is the content that I'm going to take you through? First of all, I will say a few words about the importance of inclusive and accessible communication. We'll talk about the basic principles of inclusive communications. I'll share with you some practical tips and tricks on inclusive communication. I'll come up with some examples of innovations, and there is time for questions and answers. All right. I first would like to start by saying relax. When I talk about inclusive and accessible communication and people are in training, they often feel very stressed because they think like, oh, I should do this perfect. I'm not allowed to make any mistakes when it comes to communication, inclusive communication. Well, I think the best thing is to relax. I mean, it's not rocket science. I think it's very important that you strive for continuous improvement rather than to be perfect, right? There is this quote from Kim Collins: strive for continuous improvement instead of perfection. And I have been working on inclusive communication for quite some time, and I'm still learning every day. So I think the important thing is that you start your learning process and you learn step by step to improve. And there are always new things to learn. Nobody's perfect, but let's start the journey together. Okay. Why is inclusive and accessible communication so important? Alessia already mentioned it. It's mentioned in the UN Convention, especially Article 9 is about accessibilities. And I'll read you a few sentences from the UN CRPD. It says, Article 9 says, state parties shall take appropriate measures to ensure to persons with disabilities access on an equal basis with others to the physical environment, to transportation, but also to information and communication, including information and communication technologies and systems. So that's what we're going to focus on this webinar. And there's also Article 21 in the Convention. That one is about freedom of expression and opinion and access to information. And there it reads, state parties shall take appropriate measures to ensure that persons with disabilities can exercise the right to freedom of expression and opinion, including the freedom to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas on an equal basis with others and through all forms of communication of their choice. So this is what the convention says about accessible communication. Of course, there are more details in the convention, but I'm not going to talk you through all the details. Here are some more elements in Article 21. In Article 21. So it's about accessible format and technologies. It's also about accepting and facilitating the use of sign language, braille, augmentative and alternative communications, and all other accessible means, modes, and formats of communications. And there is also an important part that states have to encourage the mass media to make their services accessible to persons with disabilities. And also they should promote the use of sign languages. So these are the cadres we're working within when we talk about inclusive communication. Let's move on to the basic principles of inclusive communication. The UN Convention talks about barriers, right? There are different kind of barriers identified, and usually there are 4 types of barriers. First of all, there are the attitudinal barriers. It's about the attitude of people. There are communication barriers. That's about the barriers that may be there when communication is inaccessible. There are physical barriers and institutional barriers. So in this session, we'll focus on the communication barriers. How can we remove communication barriers? How can we make communication accessible? That's the question. So, what is inclusive and accessible communication? Well, it's about creating a supportive and effective communication environment using every available means of communication to understand and to be understood. And that last part, to understand and be understood, is very important. When we talk about inclusive and accessible communication, it's about two-way communication. It's about people with disabilities able to access the message, but also able to express themselves as well. I think often this last part, or sometimes this last part, is forgotten. It's not only about sending our message to people with disabilities, it's the other way. It's both ways, right? It should be two-way communication. And I think it's also very important to realize that inclusive and accessible communication is also a benefit to all audiences. It's not only about people with disabilities, it's a benefit for all audiences. So that's the basic principle of inclusive and accessible communication. Good. I will come up with some tips and tricks on inclusive communication, and there will be different topics that I will touch upon. First of all, I will say a few things about disability-friendly language. And then I will touch upon how do we portray people with disabilities in our communications. I will explain a bit about accessibility needs of people with different kind of disabilities. We will have a part about inclusive ICT and some slides on inclusive documents and presentations. How do I make my documents more accessible? I'm not going to give a full lecture because then I would keep you busy for the rest of the afternoon. So I will just touch upon these topics, but there will be links in my slides as well. So you can later on, if you download the presentation, you can just click on the links and you'll go straight to more in-depth information. And I will also touch upon the topic of inclusive meetings. All right, disability-friendly language. Why is this so important? I think it's very important when we address people with disabilities, we use the right language, right? Language is very strong. So if we use rights-based language, that will help also to promote the rights of people with disabilities. So there are some basic rules about disability-friendly language. First of all is call people by their name. On this slide, I've put a little cartoon, and some of you may be familiar with it. The cartoon shows a man sitting in a wheelchair and a lady asking him, so what do you prefer to be called, handicapped, disabled, or physically challenged? And then this person says, well, Joe would be fine. And the message is the most appropriate label usually to refer to people with disabilities is by using their names that have been given. So don't mention a disability or impairment when it's not needed. People have a name. And another important rule is use people first language. What is people first language, you may wonder? It's the language that's being used in the convention. It says persons with disability. So when you refer to people with disabilities, use the person first and then a disability, not disabled person, but a person with a disability, or a person with a visual impairment. So put the people first. That's an important rule. Very important is also to ask, because people with disabilities, I mean, it depends on country and context how they prefer to be called. So it's always good to ask, you know, what do you think? What is the language that you want me to use? I think it's also important to avoid euphemistic terms like people with different abilities, and we can think of people with other talents, etc., etc. I think it's fine just to use people with disabilities rather than these euphemistic terms. And often people don't know how to refer to people without disabilities. Sometimes in a training, people say, well, normal people, and then, well, you shouldn't use the word normal people, because then it seems like people with disabilities are not normal. So if you want to refer to people without disabilities, just say people without disabilities. And also an important one is I think it's good to avoid acronyms. Often the acronym PWD is being used to refer to persons with disabilities, but it's just not nice to refer people with an acronym, right? You wouldn't feel happy if people refer to you as an acronym. So I think it's better to avoid acronyms, and also I really try to abolish also the acronyms in writing, because once it's written, it's spoken out loud, and we can just say people with disabilities. It takes as much time as PWD, doesn't it? So I would like to encourage you to avoid those acronyms. If you have any questions about this, please write your questions in the chat box. I can respond to it later. Good. How do we portray people with disabilities in our communications? Of course, communication is not only about talking, it's also about, you know, pictures that we use, photos, videos. How are people with disabilities portrayed? And as an example, I've put two icons on the slide. One is an icon of a person sitting in a wheelchair in a more passive mode, and the second icon is a person sitting in a wheelchair in an active mode, moving forward. So those two symbols, they bring across a very different message, right? The first symbol is about a person with disability who is patiently waiting, and the other symbol is about a person with disability taking action, going somewhere. So it's a completely different picture. Also some rules here. When we want to communicate about people with disabilities in a rights-based way, I think it's very important to, when you show pictures of people with disabilities, it's with dignity. Don't don't show the pictures with people with disability crawling on the ground. That's not the message that we want to bring. We want to show people with disability with dignity. Another thing is it's very important to show people with disabilities also as active participants. Yeah, we want to change the stereotypes about people with disabilities. We should think about what kind of pictures do we use. I think also it's also very important to let people with disabilities speak for themselves. Sometimes you may have like a video and then it's not the person with disability who's saying something, but it's an expert or someone else. I think we should avoid that. Let people with disabilities speak for themselves. And I think it's also very important that that we also portray people with disability when the topic is not related, not disability related. So I really love those commercials where people with disabilities play a role, not because they are representing a person with disability, but because they are working in this company, for example. Right, so it's also good to show the inclusion in our communications. That will be a strong message and will change attitudes. All right, let's talk about how we can overcome communication barriers. Well, first of all, it's very important to use different formats when you want to bring a message across. For example, if you organize a meeting, you can send out information, a letter, but you can also do a radio broadcast. So make sure that you send the message out in different formats, so everyone with different kind of needs can access this message. I think that's an important rule to overcome communication barriers. And of course, it's very important that you familiarize yourself with the accessibility needs of people with different kind of impairments. And I will share some information in the next few slides, but there's much more to learn. So dig into that, start to understand the specific needs that people with different kind of impairments have. And also, it's very important when you communicate with a person with a disability, just ask. Don't assume that people, well, cannot hear or cannot speak, or just ask. What do you need to make this communication accessible? That these are the very basic principles. I will get you through some slides with the communication needs of people with different kind of disabilities. I will not touch upon all different kind of impairments and all needs, but I just picked a few topics here. I will also show you some links later on where you can find more information. But let's start with the communication needs of people with visual impairments. Usually access to text is a very important one. So there could be different kind of formats. It could be large print, it could be Braille, but there are also people who use speech software. And it's also important to have audio description, for example, with videos. So this is some of the communication needs. It's also very important for people with visual impairments to have access to the visual information. For example, access to pictures in documents. If there's no description of the picture, you miss out on information, right? If there is no voiceover with a video or with a movie, you miss out that information. So that's a very important communication need. On this slide, I've also put a picture with the Braille alphabet, just to show you the example of the Braille alphabet, how it looks like. What are the communication needs of people with hearing impairments? For them, it's really important to have access to spoken language and sounds. Sign language is a very good example. Closed captioning, which we don't have today, unfortunately, is very important, but also subtitles on TV, for example. Also, people with speech impairments do have specific communication needs. They also need the possibility to express themselves. I have put a picture here of Stephen Hawking. He is sitting in a wheelchair, and he was using a specific speech software. I think he was using his eye movements to speak. So this is very important. There are a lot of devices that can be used to communicate. There are many different ways of communication. Sign language is one of them, but these speech computers are also a way to overcome barriers to communication. But there is also a tactile sign language for people who are deaf-blind. So there are different kind of communication formats. And then I would like to highlight the communication needs of people with intellectual disabilities. For them, it's really important that plain language is being used. So when you speak, it could be plain language. You can also make documents which are easy to read. In the picture, there is an example about how easy read document looks like. So what we see is on the left a picture with on the right a simple message about that picture. So it's pictorial information in combination with easy plain language. I'm not going into details here, but if you would like to know more about how to produce easy read documents, you can click on the links that are presented here. So there's a guide to producing easy read documents, and there's the easy read guidelines from the European Union. It's really interesting to look into that. I personally would like to learn more on this topic myself as well. So I would really like to encourage you to look into it. I shared some communication needs of people with different kind of disabilities, but it's not a complete list. It's not comprehensive. So I really would like to encourage you to look for more information on this topic. So how can you gather more skills on inclusive communication? Some tips. I think it's very helpful if you invite resource persons to your organization to give a training. So invite a person who is deaf and ask this person to give you a training on how to communicate. I think that's the best way to learn. Of course, you can search online for resources. There is an example here of a resource book on disability inclusion from Light for the World, but there are plenty others. There are more links that will come. And another important thing is just do it. I mean, you can talk about inclusive communication for ages, but you just go and learn by doing. Here is also a picture on this slide. On the picture, you'll see it's a picture taken from a workshop in Uganda recently, where you see 3 blind participants in the training. They are learning sign language, and they're helped by 3 people who are deaf themselves or who are sign language interpreter, and they're holding the hands of the persons who are blind to really show them how to do the sign language. So this is just a way of just doing it. I mean, it's quite complicated when you're blind to learn sign language, but if we help each other, it's going to work out. So this picture is there to encourage you to just do it and learn. Okay, I'm taking a little bit of water. I would like to move on to the inclusive ICT part. It's very important that our websites are accessible. They should be accessible for people with different kind of disabilities, not only for blind people, but also for people with intellectual impairment, but also there may be people who are not able to use the keyboard. So the website should be accessible for everyone. There is the web content accessibility guidelines. You can find it on the website. There is a link here also to this website. There are documents that explain how to make web content more accessible to people with disabilities. I'm not going into detail here because it takes too much time, but also because it's not my topic. So have a look there yourself. If you want to develop a website, go there and you'll find everything, all the information that you need. On the website, you will also find some videos on web accessibility perspectives. I just want to share you a short, like just a few minutes of this video. I found it quite interesting. So I'll show you just a few minutes and then I'll continue with my presentation. Let's see if it works.
Web accessibility perspectives. Video captions. Video isn't just about pictures, it's also about sound. Without the audio, you'd have to guess what this film is about. Frustrating, isn't it? Not knowing what's going on. That's the situation for everyone who can't hear. Captions mean or where you need to be very, very quiet. Colors with good contrast. There's something about great design that allows it to go practically unnoticed. But it doesn't take much to make things confusing or frustrating. Choosing colors with poor contrast is good design means sufficient contrast between foreground and background colors. That's not just text and images, but links, icons, and buttons. If it's important enough to be seen, then it needs to be clear. And this is essential for people with low contrast sensitivity, which becomes more common as we age. With good colors, websites and applications can be easier to use in more situations, like in different lighting conditions.
I'll just stop the video here. I just heard from my colleague that not everyone is able to access the video because your connection speed may be too low. So I'll stop the video here and I would like to encourage you to have a look at the video later on yourself. What I really like about this video is that it explains in very clear language what accessibility features are important and also how it benefits all audiences, right? If we make our websites more accessible, everyone will benefit, not only people with disabilities. I think that's a very important principle. Okay, I would like to move on to another topic related to digital inclusion. There is a website of a global initiative for inclusive ICT. They're promoting the rights of persons with disabilities in the digital age. You can click on the link here if you would like to go to this website. And I have included a screen dump with the website, the resource center that's there. And it's you'll find a lot of interesting information on this website. First of all, there is this country dashboard, which shows the status of accessibility of ICT in a whole range of countries. So it's really interesting to go and have a look at your own country and to see how your country is scoring on this index. There is the DARE index, that's about a benchmark about inclusion in ICT. There is a portal for people who are buying ICT projects, ICT products. So how can you make sure it will be inclusive in your terms of reference? So there's more information there. But there's also a toolkit on e-accessibility, different kind of publications. So definitely worthwhile to have a look there if you want to have more information. I just wanted to share with you the top 3 countries according to the DARE index. DARE stands for Digital Accessibility Rights Evaluation Index. So they have scored different countries, and when we look at the high income countries, it's Oman, France, United States, and Qatar who have the best digital accessibility. And when it comes to upper and middle income countries, it's Brazil, South Africa, and the Russian Federation. For lower middle income countries, it's Kenya, Ukraine, Angola, and Zambia with the best digital accessibility. And for low income countries, it's Malawi, Ethiopia, and Haiti. But have a look on the website to find your own country. My own country isn't there. Netherlands, I couldn't find it in the index yet, but I'm sure it's going to come as part of the reporting on the UNCRPD. So this is just a quick view there. If you want to learn more about digital accessibility, there is a great digital accessibility toolkit from CBM. So you can follow the link here if you want to learn more on that part. I will give you some very, very basic tips on making Word documents accessible. There is also the Bridging the Gap guidelines. You'll find a lot of information there. I just wanted to share you the most easy things to make your Word documents accessible. A very important one is to make a good document structure. So the speech software for people who use the speech software can easily navigate the document. So use the styles, which is part of the Word settings, to make a title, a heading, etc. So give a good structure to your document. And it's just helpful for everyone if you have a good structure, right? And then a very important one, you have to give each picture or diagram a description. If you have a look in my PowerPoint presentation and you'll click on each picture, you'll find an explanation. You can add this alternative text yourself. So in the screen, in the picture in the screen, you will see how it looks like if you add alternative text, right? So you just click, you just include a description of the picture. For example, here there is a sign language interpreter giving sign language interpretation on TV. That's an example. So just do that, and yeah, it will make the picture accessible for people who are blind or low vision. And there is also a very important accessibility checker in Word. So you can use the accessibility checker to find all the accessibility issues in your document. So there is, you'll find this one under the section, under the tab Review. There is the Check Accessibility. If you click that button, it will show where there may be bottlenecks when it comes to accessibility. So most of the times it says, oh, this picture doesn't have a description, there are too many enters here, etc., etc. The style is not okay. So you can easily improve these issues, and you'll know your Word document is accessible. So these are just 3 basic tips. There are much more to say, but just start with these 3 ones and you'll come a far end. When it comes to accessible presentation, of course, the same tips applies. Also, PowerPoint does have a accessibility checker, but again, it's also very important to make sure you have good contrast of letters and background. And you really have to be cautious when you're transferring PowerPoint, for example, to PDF files. So if you want to read more about this, please have a look at the IDDC accessibility guidelines or the Bridging the Gap inclusive communication guidelines. They just put online a few days ago. It's a really nice presentation or document. Just have a look there and you'll find more tips also about how to make your Facebook pictures accessible, etc. I'm going to look into it in more detail later on myself as well, so I can learn from it as well. Of course, it's also important to make sure that meetings are inclusive. You will find more information on this topic, for example, in this detailed guide. It's developed by Ryerson University. You can click here and you'll find all the information that you want to have about organizing inclusive conferences. A lot of details there. If you say, well, I don't need all these details, it's not going to be a big conference, well, maybe you can just have a look at the short checklist in the IDDC accessibility guidelines. It's just like two pages that will help you to remind what to think of when you organize a meeting and how to make it inclusive. So have a look there. All right, we're coming towards the end of my long speech. I will share you a few examples of innovations when it comes to inclusive communication, and then there is space for asking questions. I just want to share some nice initiatives with you. For example, there is a Be My Eyes app. I don't know if you heard about it. For me, it was just new. It's an app that's linking people with visual impairments with sighted volunteers. And they can connect through a video connection. So if you are a person who's blind and you just want to make sure you're taking the right medication and there is no braille on your medication box, you can just link with a volunteer and they can help you read out, for example, the medicine box. Right? All right, this is your medicine. The other one is the other one. So it's just a very simple app that people can use. And then they can access written text just by using a video connection. It's a nice initiative. I have downloaded the app on my telephone and I am sighted, so I subscribed myself as a volunteer, but I haven't helped anyone yet. But if you look at the website, you'll see there are many happy users. So it's just nice to have a look there. This is just a innovation. There are plenty of them. I just picked a few ones. There is also the video relay service. This is real-time sign language interpretation through a video connection. I mean, this possibility is already there for quite a long time. But here in the link, you will find an example of a bank that is using this service to support their clients who are deaf. And it's a very easy way to make their services accessible. So this is also a good example of inclusive communication. Another example is Uber. Uber is the taxi provider worldwide, and they have made their app accessible for deaf drivers. And here you'll see a picture of a deaf driver, and in his car there is a information leaflet for customers how to communicate. So they learn some basic signs and they get some tips and tricks how to communicate with the driver who is deaf. And this is just one of the thousands examples of how technical solutions will help to promote inclusion. And another thing I would like to share with you is the possibility to follow accessibility learning webinars. These webinars especially focused on people with different kind of disabilities, and they can ask for support on how to use Microsoft programs. For example, if you are if you have a visual impairment, how can I work with particular programs? So they have these online webinars where you can ask your questions and get some more input on how to use Microsoft applications when you have specific needs. So this is really interesting. If you have specific needs and you would like to get more skills, you can go to join these webinars. Well, that's it. These were just a few examples. I would like to thank you for your attention. I would love to hear your questions, your feedback, or maybe your own good practices. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Paulien. It was really interesting, your presentation, I think. And for that reason, I think that we will have a lot of questions. So I really invite participants to make questions by writing them in the chat box, or also you can raise your hand, and I will allow you to. I will open or turn off on your mic to make your question directly to Pauline. Just few things. You can find the handouts, the Pauline's presentation. That a lot of us are asking me in the chat box, so you can find it in the handouts. But no worries, because you will receive it also with the follow-up email with the recording and with the transcription, and also with the presentation and learning materials. Another thing that I would like just to ask to Pauline, if you can share the link of the video we were not able to show to the participants in the chat box, also privately to me. I will share the link with the all participants, so you will be able to watch the video through the YouTube link. So, well, I have a first really interesting question from Angelique. She's just asked about the acronyms. So she asked, I have a question regarding acronyms and the social networks, especially Twitter. For those kind of platforms where characters are very limited, would you also recommend not use the acronyms? So thank you, Pauline, to just give us a question about this topic.
Oh, great! Yeah, that's a good one. I think only Twitter has a limitation when it comes to words. Of course, hashtag PWD. Yeah, of course, then it's a hashtag. But otherwise than that, I would not advise to do it. But anyway, yeah, Twitter is a difficult one. But as soon as you start using PWDs, people, the acronym, people will repeat it. So anyway, I haven't thought about Twitter yet, but for all the other things, I definitely would say try to avoid it. Does that answer your question, Angelique?
Yeah, she's in front of me and she's saying yes, because Angelique, she's the IDC coordinator, so she's here.
Thank you.
With me. Yes. So, well, I have another question from Giovanni. He would like to know how to implement this approach on social media communication. Thanks, Pauline, for your answer.
Okay.
Hello?
Yeah. Yes, please. Go ahead.
No, take your. It was just a question.
Yeah.
That he how to
maybe
implement. Sorry.
Yeah. Maybe you can repeat the question. I didn't get
it.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes, of course.
Yeah.
The question from Giovanni. He would like to know how to implement this approach on social media communication.
I think how to implement the approach in social media. I think it's very important to make sure that your social media is accessible. I was looking at the guidelines from Bridging the Gap on inclusive communication. There are some specific tips and tricks about social media and inclusion. So though these are the more technical things, so how to add a description to pictures. But I think in general it's very important when you post pictures, for example, in WhatsApp groups or on Facebook, that you give a description of the picture in your text, right? So I try to do this in my private Facebook post as well. So add a description to your pictures. When you're using videos, make sure there are subtitles. If you share for example, a video, also make sure that apart from the subtitles, there is also a voiceover for people with visual impairments. So these are just a few basic tips, but yeah, I think it's important to make sure that all the communications are accessible. Does that answer your question, Johnny?
Thanks a lot. I have another comment from Camille that is, I think it's really interesting. It's not a question, but it's, I think it's a point of reflection important, because he said, I think that disabled, it's not bad, and actually it is the term I use in order to emphasize on the barriers we face by the society. Yes, I think that the issue about the wording is really important in communication, and I don't know if you have some tips, or if you can share your point of view about that. It would be nice.
Yeah. I think it's how we use the word disability, disabled. I think it's very important to use the right words. Again, in different languages, different words are being used. So when you click on the links that I gave in the presentation, you'll find more information on wording. But of course, it's in English, and I think it's very important also to look for the right words in your own language. My own language is Dutch, and we don't have a word for disability, for example. So we need to find words that are rights-based in our own language. I think the most important thing is that we do not reduce people to their disabilities. So don't talk about the disabled in general, but it's also about people with disability. I think that's my key message there. I hope that helps you.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, I think it's an issue that for people, especially work in this on this, it's something that always we ask. Well, I have several questions, Pauline. So be prepared.
Yes.
We have half an hour more. So I invite also participants to make more questions and to really take the opportunity to have today with us Pauline on this important topic. So I have a question from made by Sarah. She said, when writing accessible content, do you use plain English or easy to read guidelines?
Okay, so the question from Sarah is: should we use plain English or the full easy read version guidelines, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think it depends a bit on your audience and on what message you want to bring across. I think it's always good to use plain language. Yeah, I think. Sorry, maybe I misunderstood the question. Is it right that you're asking whether should we use the term plain language or should we use the term easy read? I think both terms are all right. Some people prefer to use the term plain language. Other ones prefer to use the term the easy language. But in the end, it's about making sure the language that's being used is easy to understand. But for the wording, it depends a bit on which region you are, whether people prefer to use plain language or prefer to say easy language. Yeah, does that answer the question, Sarah?
Of course, thank you, Pauline. Of course, I'm talking to the participants. If you want to, also people that already made some question and you want to indeed the answer of Pauline, you feel free to text on the chat box or raise your hand and go through your details of the answer. So I have another question from Giuseppe. So he asks, are there differences in style when approaching young persons with disability or adult persons with disability? Thank you for your answer.
Thank you, Giuseppe. That's a nice question. I think usually when you talk with children or with adults, there will be a difference in approach. So I guess when you talk with children with disabilities or adults with a disability, yeah, there will also be differences in approaches. But I think it doesn't really make a difference whether someone has a disability or not. I think we may have used different styles for different people, right? I think what is really important to keep in mind is when you're talking, for example, with people with intellectual disabilities, some people may have the assumption that you may need to talk to them in a more childish way, which is not true, because when you have an intellectual impairment and you're an adult, it doesn't mean that you want to be talked to in a childish way, right? So treat everyone as an adult or as a child. I think that's the important thing, the message here. Yeah, thank you. Next question.
Thanks a lot. I have a question that I hope that I understood from Raya. So I asked also to Raya, if I didn't understand well your question, please text it again. But if I understood well, also it's an interesting question. It's about the marker. So Raya asked how we can mark the accessibility, and also if the Washington group can use to marker the accessibility. I don't know if I really understood the question. I really hope so. If not, I'm going ahead with another, as you prefer. I just asked to Raya to explain better. Yeah, exactly. So I have another question. So would you have any tools in mind to develop easy-to-read website content? Another question from our IDC coordinator.
Well, I don't have any specific tools in mind, rather than the tools that are being promoted on the WCAG website. They have very clear standards there, and all kind of tips and advice. So I don't have anything in addition there. I'm not really into website design, so I'm sorry.
And also on the line of the easy-to-read version, another question from Nora that asks, are there any books or links about easy-to-read communication?
Yes, sure. I have added 2 links to how to produce easy read materials. So if you follow the links, you'll find a very comprehensive tools. And also, of course, you can always Google and look for YouTube movies on how to do it. To really produce easy read a document, for example, it's not rocket science, but it is a skill. So I think it's really good to practice there and look into the details. But anyone can learn this, so don't worry. Have a look at the links.
Thank you very much. I have just several questions about new technologies. I just will
Mm-hmm.
try to put all together the sense because are more or
Yeah,
less
sure.
they are asking the same. So it's the fact that the technology is changing so fast. And in some cases, we think that technology is going to support a lot in terms, especially of communication, persons with disabilities. But how can really really create some issues or problem, the fact that technology is changing so fast in terms if technology is going to support deaf people or blind people or deaf blind people, can we how we can adapt the technology on that, and the fact that it's changing so fast is going to have not a good impact on that,
Yeah.
or not.
Yeah. In one way, new technologies are going to provide a lot of technical solutions, right, to overcome communication barriers. On the other side, indeed, it's changing very fast. So what was here today won't be there tomorrow. So I think that's why it's so important to have a very strong lobby on inclusive ICT, because ICT is the future, and we really have to make sure right now it will be designed in an accessible way. So that lobby is very important. Yeah, so that's the only answer. We really have to lobby for inclusive ICT, and that's why I really like the website from that I showed about inclusive ICT. They have a lot of very practical tools, also for developers, on how to make ICT accessible. So yeah, there is an assignment for all of us to promote inclusion in ICT. Otherwise, the new technology will not be a solution, but a problem. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I think the same. I think that the new technology are really to support, have the potential to support persons with disability, especially in communication, a lot, but we have to be careful, I think, and establish before something common and some strategy that we can give us a common vision on that.
Yeah.
So I have another question, a specific question from Michele. Uh, he's a photographer and
Mm-hmm.
also communication officer, and he just said, I found sometimes difficult to represent this harsh topic in a visual way. Do you have any tips, or do you know any professional authors that work on this argument in an interesting, smart, photographic way? Short videos, documentaries too.
Okay, that's a nice question, Michael. So the question is how to communicate in an accessible way with photography, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So of course, on one side there is how do we portray people with disabilities. On the other side is how can we make the photography accessible. Um, Yeah. I don't have anything specific in mind right now. I didn't look into that topic. But I know I know also some initiatives. I think that it's here in Holland right now. There is one photographer, and she works with people who are blind, and she's working on photography together with them. And so she has developed some kind of methodology to make photography accessible for people who are blind and low vision. So they make pictures with support. I don't know exactly how it works, but it's really a very nice way to make photography accessible for people with visual impairments. I can give you the link of this photographer if you're interested. I don't know whether it answers your question, because there are many different answers possible, but I could share with you at least that photographer who worked on that methodology.
Thank you very much for your answer. And I have another specific question on autism and communication. How we communicate with people with autism?
People with autism, that's a very good one. I think when you talk with people with autism, of course, people with autism, it can be very different, right? So you have the whole spectrum. So it's not a one size fits all comment, but some communication tips could be, for example, it's very important that you bring a clear message, right? So if you ask a question, just ask one question and not 3 at a time. Because otherwise people may get confused, like what does this person mean? So come with a very clear message. Don't ask too many questions at the same time. Another important one is finish your sentences. Don't expect someone to understand when you stop halfway in your sentence. That's something. And yes, there are many more communication tips. So in the link that I've shared, there is also some more information about communication with people with autism. So you could have a look there if you would like to know more. But definitely, yeah, you can keep, there are several things to keep in mind. I hope this helps a bit.
Well, thanks a lot. I don't read any other questions, so we have still time. So I invite participants really to make some question. In the meantime, I'm receiving a lot of thank you to Pauline.
That's
So thank you
great.
for also your answer. I'm just asking you and taking me to the opportunity that you are here. So when I would like just curious about really the difference when you organize an event about the captioning and the sign language. It's appropriate to have both. What it's really different if you don't have one or another, or
Oh, good one. I think it depends a bit on the event. Like for on an online webinar, of course, captioning is very comfortable. When it comes to workshops and conferences, I think it depends a bit on the participants. You can always ask the participants if it's a small group, right? What do you prefer?
yes, if it's a
So
small group,
yeah,
or
so
also a lot of time when I participate to smaller or but also especially big event, I found both the captioning and the
exactly.
sign language. But for example, if I have to organize a small meeting and I know that there are people that need or captioning or sign language, what's the best choice? It's better deciding for the captioning or maybe the sign language. It's more,
Yeah,
it's different.
I think sign language interpretation is the most easy way for two-way communication, right? So, but I think it's important to ask when it's a small meeting. You can ask the audience, and maybe you still will need to have two ways of communication. But I think when it's a small group, you may not always need the captioning, but it can be helpful. So no strict rules there, but bit of common sense. Yeah. But for big meetings, big conferences, definitely captioning and sign language, both.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, of course.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Pauline. I just give you 1 minute more if people maybe are shy and they want to make other question.
I
In the
think,
meantime, oh yeah, say.
well, my email address is also on the first page of the presentation. So if you have any questions coming up later, you can send me an email. I'll try to answer.
No, thanks a lot,
Yeah.
thanks a lot. I also put in the chat box our all the links to our communication channel, so the website, Facebook page, Twitter, YouTube channel, Flickr, and also the session in English, French, and Spanish of this webinar on the YouTube channels. You can find these links in the chat box. So I really invite you to visit our channels, and also to get to watch again this recording. So, well, if anybody else have a question, other question, we arrive at the end of this fifth session about accessible communication. I would like to thank you, Paulien. Really, thank you very much for your participation and for really having dedicated your time to us today.
Yeah.
I also would like to say thanks a lot to the audience. I sincerely hope that today's session has taught you something and clarified some doubts about communication and on how create documents, event, presentation, and all your communication in an accessible, inclusive way. So just a couple of last things before closing the session. The webinar training cycle issues a certificate of attendance only to those whom will attend at least the 75% of the webinar and respond to the satisfaction survey that you will receive with the follow-up emails in the upcoming days. The 75% of the training course corresponds to 9 out of 12 webinars. You will receive the survey together, as I said, with the webinar recordings and the learning materials, the presentation, and also the transcription of today that unfortunately we didn't have the live captioning. I promise it is going to not happen anymore. I really hope so. And so the next session will take place at the end of January. So we will see next year. And it will be on legislating on disability rights to identify potential gaps in legislative provisions in relation to the CRPD and to learn more on advocacy for the legislative proposals. Another important and really interesting topic, so I recommend you to not miss it. Well, thanks a lot again to Paulien. Thanks a lot to our participants. See you next time. Enjoy the end of your day. Thank you, Paulien. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.